Hello, everyone, and welcome to Organic Week. We're celebrating organics across the country, and thanks to the Canadian Organic Trade Association, who sponsors this event and the many events that happen across the country as a part of the celebration of Organic Week. Today, I'm going to talk to a couple of farmers from fairly distinct regions of the country, one in British Columbia and one in the prairies. And we're going to talk today about the value and the benefits of undertaking organic certification. We often hear that certification is a barrier for some farms hoping or considering transition to organics. And sometimes we also hear that certified farms find the process to be rather cumbersome, overcomplicated, and again, sometimes serves as a barrier to recertification on some farms. So I'll start by introducing Corinne and Allison. Corinne's farm is in British Columbia, and Allison's farm is in Saskatchewan in the prairies. And I'll allow them to first just talk a little bit about their farms and their farming practices, and then I'll ask a series of questions to sort of help guide the conversation around sort of how they view the certification process for their farms and for them personally. So I'll start with you, Corinne.
Hi everyone. So our farm is called Wintersun Farm, and we're located in the central coast of BC. In quite a remote, very fertile valley right in the middle of the Coast Mountains. Our farm is a mixed farm, so we raise livestock. We have chicken, broilers, and layers. We have cattle and pigs, and we grow every type of vegetables under the sun. We have a few greenhouses and some field crops. We established in 2020, so it's a very new farm. We moved here, we bought the property, and we transitioned the land to organic as soon as we arrived. And now we are fully certified organic.
And now, Allison, I'll ask you to introduce yourself and your farm.
Thanks, Karen. Hi, everyone. I'm Allison Squires. I'm owner-operator of Upland Organics is our farm name, and we're located in South Central Saskatchewan, about 20 minutes north of the U.S. border, in a little, very dry region called the Palliser Triangle. So we're quite different from Corinne in terms of our average moisture is around 6 inches a year for the growing season. So we're a little bit different. But we operate a mixed farm as well. So we have primarily, we focus on organic small grains, so pulses, oilseeds, cereals, plethora of cover crops. We also introduced a herd of cattle in 2019, 2018. So we also rotational graze about 300 cow-calf pairs across our cover crop acres. That's the main enterprise on our farm, but we also dabble in other areas too. We have chickens, pigs as well, and we also finish beef to sell directly to consumers. And we have a small apiary on the farm too, which is really fun. And then on top of all that, we also operate a commercial grain cleaning facility on site. So that's really helped us navigate the organic markets, because we can clean all of our organic grains right here on site and ship directly to consumers. We started our farm in 2010, so we've been certified for a little over a decade now, and it's been quite the learning curve, but it's been really fun.
Thanks, Allison, and thanks, Corinne. So I guess I'll start with, one of the challenges that I identified sort of in my introduction around barriers. And have either of you faced any barriers as a certified organic operation through the certification process? And how did you overcome those barriers? And did you see certification as a barrier itself?
I can start if you want. I didn't see any barriers. However, I have experienced some barriers in the past. This is not the first farm that I certify organic. So here in Bella Coola, we don't have any, there isn't any neighbor farms adjacent to our property. And so there was no danger of like drifts of, you know, chemicals and everything. For some people, the requirement of buffers around their farm can sometimes be a little bit onerous. In the past, I was managing a farm in Tsawwassen Delta, close to Vancouver, and it is a very busy agricultural area. And fields are, you know, right beside other farmers' fields, and we were beside conventional farmers. And then we had to, you know, establish a buffer. So we ended up planting a hedgerow, for example. So that was a bit of a barrier. The other thing that could be a barrier is the land history. So if previously to you establishing your organic operation there was chemical being used on the land, then you might have to document and, you know, communicate with the previous owner and everything, and try to get that thorough land history. In terms of what people consider to be barriers, usually, which is the paperwork, so much paperwork. I don't think it's actually a lot of paperwork. It's just it's good business hygiene anyways to have all these records, like all the invoices from your farm, all the input. You should have that somewhere, and you should know how much you're producing. So if the organic certification process actually motivates you to keep better records, then in the end that really helps your business thrive, because, you know, as a farmer you absolutely need all of this information. There is no extra information that you need to record that you shouldn't have anyways. So
Yeah, I could not have summarized that any better, Corinne, especially about the paperwork, because that's what I hear is the biggest barrier as well. And, you know, on a farm of our scale, where it's thousands and thousands of acres, people assume that it's quite onerous, but we found a system that works for us. Everything is digitized and on hand. And just as you said, it's good business hygiene to keep all of this anyways. So it's nothing extra over and above what you would normally have to do. It's just now it's available for you to use to make smart business management decisions. So we can track because we have all of this, we can track our yields per acre across every field, across every crop type. You know, we know exactly how much we sold and how much we've gotten off the fields and how much we've cleaned out. And it's been really great, actually, at the end of the day, to have all of that organized the way it's been. So I appreciate your comments around that, because I think that's really a key point that people sometimes don't realize, is how much beneficial you can get out of actually keeping yourself organized. And then I think a barrier that we've seen here out in the prairies anyways is, again, probably related to scale, is that it is quite difficult to manage crop rotations across so many acres. So I think there's a lot of myth busting to do around, you know, figuring out a crop rotation that works within the organic standards, inputs that work within the organic standards. That's probably the question we get a lot when people are trying to transition, is what can they use? You know, where do they source their seed? And those kinds of issues are probably some of the biggest barriers that we've seen in talking with other farmers, but they're easily solved when you develop your network of peers and you can source things locally that way quite easily.
And so to build on that a little bit, you sort of touched on it already, but to maybe just sort of dig into it a tiny bit more, what do both of you see as the biggest business benefits to organic certification, aside from just maintaining the good records?
So for us, because we're a small farm and we sell a lot to the direct community, there is that accountability. You know, we do direct marketing, so people know that we're organic. They come and they drop by, they pick up their produce directly from the farm. So there isn't a lot of you know, there's lots of trust there. But we decided to be organic for like a few selected crops that we actually ship out of the valley. So things like squash that we grow in large quantity, or garlic. which, for example, in the case of garlic, is more than twice the price when you are certified organic. So it was, in that sense, it was a business decision, because on the other side, on the just like localized operation, I mean, whether we're certified or not, we would abide by organic practices, right? So yeah, so it's to be able to access those organic markets.
Yeah, we're something similar to that. To jump on that, the organic marketing system is quite unique, and we've really enjoyed the interaction between the people who eat our food and the people who grow our food. And so on our farm, we've really put a lot of time and effort into trying to do that with small grains. So we've made direct connections with local mills in Canada, and we ship small little quantities to them. And a little taste of what Corinne enjoys on her farm is that we sometimes get emails or phone calls from people who have turned the package of flour over from these mills and seen our name on the back and looked us up. And we've gotten phone calls and emails from those consumers with questions and interest in learning more about our farm. And it's been really, really enjoyable to make that direct connection. And so that's, now you're not necessarily a business benefit, but it's definitely a mental health benefit. So it's been really great that way. And then of course, obviously the organic premiums make smart business sense to us as well. We're able to procure a higher price for our product because of the organic certification. And it's something that's definitely helped our farm diversify to the extent that we have.
So another question I have that I often hear when I'm talking to farms that are questioning or considering organic certification is, what exactly is involved in the inspection process? You know, just sort of, and I guess without going into a tremendous amount of detail, just sort of maybe walk through the process, you know, a little bit with us.
So the organic inspection process starts off farm. So for us, we send our records to the inspector. We are assigned an inspector. We send the records. They look at it prior, and then they get a picture of what the farm operations are. And then when they come, we take them for a stroll through the fields. And then they basically check, for example, if you have livestock, they will check the housing of your livestock, if it abides by the standard and everything else. And then they will look at the area that's under cultivation, and then they try to match like the amount of seed or input that you have with the amount of production, so that you haven't bought this many seeds that could produce, but you're claiming that you're like producing this many tons of. So basically they're just like making sure it's a very casual process actually, and it's very, very quick. So if your records are really good, the inspection can be really, really quick. Now Allison has a much larger farm, so I imagine she's taking her certifier on truck rides, but for us, you can walk the entire farm pretty quickly. So yeah, and it's nice because most of the inspectors that that we've had on our farm were really nice and very knowledgeable of organic, and they're very helpful, and it's a good straightforward process, I would say.
Yeah, I feel like we get as much out of the inspection knowledge wise as you get out of it having a certificate at the end. But similar process to what Corinne just outlined for our farm as well. Everything starts with the initial paperwork request. We send it into our certifier. Again, we're inside an inspector, he comes out. On our farm, because of our size, you're right, it does take a little bit longer. We usually host the inspector for a full day, and we have lunch and everything together, and it's really fun. We spend the morning usually around the kitchen table, going through all of that paperwork that Corinne just outlined, again tracking every kernel that we've grown and shipped out. Everything has to be accounted for. And then the afternoon we're spent in the truck driving around. We actually get out and walk the fields a lot of times. We do some weed scouting and we do yield estimates on every single field, so we can kind of get a sense of how much green we'll have at the end of the year. And then once that's all done, we do submit additional paperwork afterwards in the form of what's called a harvest summary. So we actually submit to our certifier what we actually ended up harvesting at the end of the day, and so we can account for the amount of grain in every single one of our grain bins in that way. So again, it sounds like a lot, but it's again something that you would be tracking anyway, so it's not any different except that you had to send it away to somebody else. So yeah, the inspection process is quite involved, but I think what's important for everyone to understand is that it's a third-party process, meaning that, you know, there's no way that an organic farmer would be able to influence the decision in any way. It's totally outside of their control. They have a complete stranger come to their farm, go through everything independently. So it's there's very few other systems like this for certification in agriculture where you have that independent third-party verification process.
Yeah. So, so that, you know, some people often suggest that, you know, organic inspections are not necessarily legitimate, but you're saying, Allison, that in fact, that's quite the opposite, that there is sort of this built-in assurance through this third-party sort of independent audit process. So that's really encouraging. Do you have any other comments, Corinne, before I ask another question, or? No?
No.
Okay. So I'm going to ask one last question before we go into sort of we'll take a different tack here a tiny bit. But before we do that, just to kind of a quick summary from both of you, what would be the top 3 reasons, or even the top 2 reasons that you chose to pursue organic certification? You know, was it purely a business decision, or were there personal or external influences that helped you make that decision and provided some rationale for you to do that?
So for me, the number one, there is a cost associated, right? So it's definitely a business decision, but also something that, you know, we haven't talked about yet is organic community and organic network and support, which is a huge reason to join organic. We're involved in, you know, in COG, and we're doing all these things. There's a lot of activity happening in workshops and networks. I know I'm in BC, and I'm part of, you know, several online organic growers groups. And I've learned tons of things from my peers. And so that's definitely a big benefit. Yeah, so the organic community and the support network is really important. And, you know, primarily, of course, we're running farm businesses, so it is a business decision.
Yeah, very similar again. I think a twist on me is that I have a background in toxicology, so I came out of school with a really clear understanding of some of the chemicals used in agriculture and their impact on the environment. And I knew that was something that I wasn't really keen on perpetuating with my career. So that was a big driver for me personally, is that knowledge base. But also, I think in speaking with my husband too, a big driver for both of us is, again, the economics of it. It is a business decision. As you say, you're spending quite a bit of money to get certified in some cases. And I think it needs to be pencil out, right? And in every way that we penciled it out, it worked really, really well for us. So that was a no-brainer as well. And I think at the end of the day too, as Corinne has really clearly outlined, it's a very welcoming atmosphere. As a newbie farmer, I have not grown up farming. I have no farming experience prior to starting this farm, which seems crazy, but at no point in my transition and into my farming career did I ever feel like the organic sector wasn't a welcoming and inclusive place. And I really am grateful for that. And I think that's really one of the main reasons why we're so involved still, is because it is a really great network to develop and a great way to grow both personally and professionally.
So I have a couple of more questions just to sort of build on a couple of points that you brought up, and maybe I'll start with you this time, Allison. You sort of talked a little bit about toxicology and inputs, and I'm just curious again, like a lot of again interested farms that may be considering transitioning often cite access to inputs or limited inputs into the system. And I'm just curious, how, like, what are those concerns and what are those considerations, and are they valid? Are there challenges accessing inputs, or how do you address sort of uh, integrating working within a systems-based approach versus a very much input-based approach to food production? So just sort of getting your thoughts and ideas around that.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I don't know how widespread of an issue it is. Maybe it's just me with my prairie perspective, but inputs are definitely cited as one of the main concerns when you're transitioning in this region. And I think it is because we are generally speaking, the prairies is a very input heavy system of growing food. And I don't think there's any way you can get around that conclusion. And so when you're transitioning to organic within a system like that, and you're used to getting your inputs and applying them in a certain way in a certain time, it's very hard to make that management mind shift to a more holistic farm whole approach. And it is a very different way of managing your land, and it's a very different way of thinking about growing food and not commodities. And I think, once you make that transition in your mind, then you can make it on your land. And I think access to inputs, there is a very limited amount of inputs that are economically viable on the prairies in organic production. There's a lot of inputs that are allowed in organic production in terms of what the standards allow. But in terms of the scale that you need to be used at and their availability in this region, there are very few options. And so I think that is a legitimate barrier. If we had access to more resources in that sense, I think we'd find a lot more people able to at least make that bridge, that transitional bridge of those 3 years between conventional and organic production a lot easier.
Thanks for that, Allison. Corinne, do you have anything that you'd like to add?
Well, in terms of input, I've definitely had some issues with some things like straw and sourcing hay, organic hay, for example, has been a little bit challenging. But in terms of vegetable seeds, I haven't had any problems. There's a lot of companies that are like strictly or have included organic seeds in their catalogs. So and in terms of inputs for growing, we use manure and we make our own fertilizers. So I understand that not everybody has the time or the capacity for doing that, but there's a lot of like Allison was saying, there's a lot of things that are allowed, like and when I say fertilizer, I'm talking more about like amendments like feather meal, blood meal, kelp, alfalfa, things like that organic growers can use. Yeah, so it's been I mean, on the small scale, I understand that on the larger scale that would be complicated to use. But on a smaller scale, I think it's pretty simple to find inputs for farms.
Okay. So to sort of start to wrap things up a little bit, we talked a little bit about the supports that you found within the organic farming community. But were there other resources that you had available to you or that you were able to find as you were making the transition into organic on your own farms? And if not, what would be some supports or resources that you think would be valuable to help farms make that transition into organic?
Well, there's a program in BC from the Ministry of Ag that helps financially farms transition to organic every year, and you are required to have a business plan to access that funding. So that's one of the barrier is the financial barrier, because it's 3 years of transitioning, so you are not really benefiting from the organic label yet, but you are paying through the process. So for smaller farms that are just getting started, it's an expense that is hard to justify sometimes. And in terms of resources, there's just a lot of extension material. A lot of it comes from the States or from other parts. I know I use a lot of the resources created by Cornell University, for example. There's lots of things online that you can find, and like I mentioned before, there's like Facebook groups and everything. So and also, if you we were talking about input, if you do contact farm supply stores, often they have somebody that is there as a technician that can help you, and you can, so there's lots of resources out there for sure. But peers, if you have neighbors who are certified organic, I think that's still the best resource, because they are growing in the same bioregion as you are. And that's all, what kind of cover crops are successful on your farm, and more than likely this is something that could work on your farm as well.
Yeah, I would say that's definitely been the highlight for us, is our local network of peers. In our journey, the very first thing that we did is we tapped into our provincial organic producer group in our region, Sask Organics, and from the very first meeting we stepped into there, we were inundated with help and advice, and it's definitely helped us a lot transition. And I think that cannot be underestimated. Regional growing groups to be part of is absolutely key. And it's not even, it's peer-to-peer learning, and it's mentorship. We have several farmers that have been growing for much longer than us that we can call for help dealing with, like in this case, this year it's been grasshoppers. So we're phoning our mentors and seeing what they did when they encountered this problem, and that's extremely valuable. And then for us too, we call ourselves graduates of YouTube University. So we like to watch a lot of conference talks and speakers on YouTube to learn what everyone's doing. And I have to shamelessly plug COG's Guide to the Organic Standards as well as being a huge resource, because sometimes if you read the organic, it's a dry read to try to read all of the 310 and 311 standards documents, but I think, the COG guide has been really great in taking that dry language and actually spelling out what it actually means and what you can take away as a farmer from reading that. So that's been really helpful in our sense as well.
Yes, and I mean, and COG does have a number of resources available on our website to help support new entrants and transitioning farms. So thanks for that. Thanks for that shameless plug, Allison. And I mean, and I do think you've mentioned, both of you, how important and how significant these farmer networks are, and that farmer to farmer knowledge exchange. And that's certainly something that's become a priority to help support and build and strengthen those farmer networks across the country, and working with the provincial organizations to help sort of guide that on the ground is certainly a priority for COG as well. And one of the other things that I just wanted to mention as well is that, every province or every region across the country does have a provincial organization that works directly with farms, and with farms and farmers, I should say. And they often have annual conferences or annual get-togethers where they do share knowledge and bring producers from the region together. And again, I think it's really important. Those organizations are certainly a big part of COG, and really want to really do a big shout out to all of those provincial organizations and the hard work that they're also doing across the country, and in collaboration with COG as well. Any last words before we wrap things up today from either you, Corinne, or you, Allison? No?
I just want to thank you for hosting us, Karen, and just reiterate that if anybody watching is interested in transitioning to organic or has more questions, obviously we're all here to answer them. So never feel like you can't reach out and ask.
Oh, absolutely, 100%. Our door is always open, and there's nothing that we love more than connecting with interested farmers, and particularly farmers that are interested in transitioning. But you know, any farmer that's really interested in any aspect of organic production, we're really happy to share our resources, share our knowledge, and you know, connect you to other farmers within our sort of coast to coast network. So thanks for mentioning that as well, Allison. And thank you both for taking time out of your busy schedules. I know that this is not an easy time of year to carve out a few minutes to sit and chat, but I'm so grateful and so appreciative that you were able to do that. And I don't think I introduced myself at the beginning of this, but my name is Karen Murchison. I'm the Executive Director of Canadian Organic Growers. And as I mentioned, please feel free to reach out to me at any time. And if you want to connect with producers within your province or anywhere across the country, we have the ability to connect you to those farmers as well. So please feel free to reach out. And again, happy Organic Week.